Alright, this is the latest spiral stair construction progress. I've attached these center round posts to the support pieces. There's 4 holes that I drilled and screwed, and then these plugs are going to be trimmed down, but these are glued and screwed to here. And then on the tops, there's going to be a tread attached. So it'll be glued and screwed down, and that is going to be cut at an angle and then around the base part to fit each one, because each post is slightly different in size. And all the post and the supports are cherry, so they'll be stained brown cherry, and then the top tread is going to be all natural. And then I've got to go through, and because this wood was dried wood, there's some splits and cracks that'll have to be filled in, and there's also a couple of places on these rounds that had a little dry rot in the center, and there's a product that I forget the name of it, but I've got to get some of it, and you brush it on or pour it on to dry rot wood. It's used a lot for old windowsills, and it will soak into the soft dry wood and harden it up to like brand new wood so that you can attach screws. And so anyway, once these treads here are cut to the right shape, they'll be glued and screwed down. I've got these long screws I'm going to countersink, and then they're going to go all the way through the top tread and into the tread of the next one that's stacked below it. And then in the center of all of these, there's going to be a hole drilled out for a 3/4 inch iron pipe. It will be attached to the floor, and then each one of these will be set over it, down, and then screwed in place. So it's just extra support. So that's what I've been doing and what I'm continuing to do. I had to buy the 2x12s to make these treads, and right now wood pricing is at its peak. I have never seen it so expensive. I needed an 8-foot 2x12 would give me 3 treads because they're 32 inches long. And of course you can't find 8-foot 2x12s. Everyone has 12-footers and 16-footers. So I got 2 16-footers, cut them in half so they would fit in my car to get them home. And I cut the first one up into the 3 sections, and what a idiot. I mean, I'm the first one to measure twice, cut once, but you know everyone will do stupid things, and I did a stupid thing. I measured it wrong, measured it again, thinking it was right, but it was wrong, and then cut a piece. So I ended up ruining one of the 8-foot 2x12s. I had to go back and get another 12-footer to cut it down, and it's just, everybody does stupid things. I don't know, it doesn't matter how long you've been at this stuff. But okay, and speaking of getting at it, that's what I need to do, get back to work. Alright, the spiral staircase continues. These are all the eventual steps. I had to plane them down from 1.5 inches to 1.25 inches, so that when they're all assembled, there should be 12 steps, and then 1 step up to the upper floor, and everything should be within the 8 3/4 inch rise. And these will be cut for each step and then glued and screwed in place. And what I'm doing right now is I am drilling the center hole out of each of these center posts. And this is critical because these are going to be placed over a single iron pipe that runs up through the center. And the holes have to be level so that the steps are level. And what I'm doing is I've marked the center, and my drill has, I don't know if you can see, but it has a little level device built into it. So I try to keep the ball in the middle as I'm drilling. And then once I drill completely through, then I use this bit to drill out the hole for the metal pipe. And it's 1.25 inches, and the pipe is about 1 1/8 inches, so it gives enough play because nothing is going to be exact with this kind of construction. So once each step is mounted on the pipe, then I can position it, mark where it's going to go exactly, because some of the steps have to be moved slightly differently, and I have to figure out where the first step is going to go because of the hole in the ceiling. It goes up to the second floor. It's a square hole. It's not a big, large, round hole, so I have to plan the steps so that your head doesn't hit the floor as the stairs curve around, and so it's very tricky, a lot of measuring and planning. But that's what I'm doing so far. I did buy this auger bit, but these things are, oh my god, if it grabs, it'll stop your drill and break your wrist. So I decided not to use that. Okay, I got to get back to work. This is the first step in installing the spiral staircase. This disc piece of wood is attached to the floor. Initially, I put in a couple of cross pieces of wood, pressure treated wood, embedded in the concrete, anticipating where the stairs would be. I've got a plumb line that goes up through. The opening is a square opening, and I didn't want to cut a huge circular opening, so I cut this, and I had to plan and design so that as the stairs sort of twist on the way up, the center isn't going to be in the center of the square. That way, as you walk up, you get to the point where your head is coming in contact with the ceiling. The stairs will be more in the opening part, and then you continue on the way up. I didn't want to waste a lot of floor space on the floor above, so it took a lot of planning. And this piece here is attached to the floor, and the very first step, the round center pole, is going to be glued and screwed to that. And the metal pipe, I don't know if you can see inside there, but I have one of these metal flanges, and I took my rotary tool, and it had a little bit, sort of like a mini router, and I carved out on the inside, on the bottom of this disc, so it would fit over the flange. And then the flange is screwed down to the original wood piece, and then I had to put some, I had to use my grinder and kind of flatten some of the stones, and then I put a couple of big gobs of refractory cement, and then set the disc on it, leveled it up, and then put a couple of screws into the wooden piece that's embedded. The stones, I don't know if you can see, but I designed it so that they kind of go in a swirl pattern around where the spiral staircase is going. So this is the first step, and the rest of it is going to be much easier than what I've already done so far. So back to work. Alright, the next thing that I'm doing with the spiral staircase, I'm attaching the top treads to the center post and the cantilever support piece. And what I had to do is to figure out where all the screws need to be. I wanted to make sure that they are not going to be sunk into a knot hole or another screw somewhere or a crack or a bad place in the wood. So I drew out plans for each stair, and so that I know where to drill. This is the plan for the first step, number one. And then I pre-drilled the holes in the steps themselves. And then I went back and I countersunk the holes to the right depth. I've got depth stops attached to the drill bit. It's a 3/8 inch drill bit. And I drilled the countersunk hole. And then I line everything up and clamp it in place, and then drill down into the piece to pre-drill all the holes. And I also check because some of the fit is a little wider in some spots, and I need to go back in and fill it in with some of the heavy-duty glue. Well, you can see, like back here, the gap is a little higher than it is in other places. So I make a little drawing of each step that needs extra glue in certain areas. That's the darkened lines. And then I take the top step back off, then I run some beads of glue around a couple of different spots, and then thicker in the spots that have the higher gaps. And then I screw everything in place. And when I line these up, I had drawn on the bottom side of the steps how they fit. You can see the pencil lines here. That way I can line up the pencil lines underneath before I screw everything right in place. And then I'll go back eventually and put plugs out of this dowel. I'll cut the size that I need and then sand them smooth. And then I've got to go back and fill in with wood filler all the little cracks, and this is the stuff I'm going to use here. It's got a tapered end to it, so I can squeeze it in place where I need to. And then I'll just fill it in, take a wet rag, wipe off all the excess, and then when that's all dried, then I can stain the bottom cherry, and I'll leave the steps just the way they are, and then they will be installed. These long screws will go down through. I've got a couple of the steps in place. This is how it's going to eventually work. I screwed in this temporary short pipe just so I could stack a couple on to see how they're going to fit. But with those drawings that I did before, I marked where other screws are below, where knots or cracks, so I know where to place when I drill the holes for these larger screws. And they're going to be 2 screws on the ends, because you need more support there, and then a third in the middle here. And they will go right down through, be countersunk, and they'll go right through to the step below. And the main pipe is this one right here, and it's going to go all the way up to the top. So what I have to do once all the pieces are ready to stack on the pipe is take it up to the top, the step ladder, bring it down, then get them all lined up so they're in the perfect spots. Then I'll mark everything before I do the final glue and screw. And then I'll have to take them all off and then start with the first one where it needs to start. And then I'll have a little marked piece of tape or something that lines up each one. So I'll keep filming as I do it, so it'll make more sense, but it's going to be pretty cool. Back to work. Okay, the next thing that I'm doing on the spiral staircase is I'm plugging all the countersunk holes on the treads. And what I'm doing is I'm putting a dollop of glue in the holes and then placing a dowel in, tapping it down, and then with this plunge tool I will just cut it off at the base of each one. I finished filling in with the wood filler and all the knots and cracks, and I'll have to do one more final fine sanding on everything and then stain all the cherry bottom pieces. This is the last step, figuratively and literally. This is step number 12. All of these I've numbered so I can keep track of where they go. And I screwed up because I screwed this one down and I didn't intend to originally. So the glue hadn't dried, so I was able to get it off. But what I want to do is this flange, I've got to route out so that the flange sets flush with the top, because the support metal pipe that goes up through the center, it's going to go up and then be flush. Move this out of the way. Everything is designed, and so the pipe will come up through the very last one and be flush with the top. So that flange will screw down and tighten on, and then I will put the final step on after, final tread. And because I screwed up, I drilled the center hole, which I didn't intend to on the final step. But then I thought I will just cut a cherry piece to put in the center, and this will be that brown cherry stain, and it should work out fine. Okay, so it's time to get back to work. Alright, this is the top step of the spiral staircase, the last one, step number 12, and the center iron pipe goes up through the middle of all of them, and it ends right at this height. So I had to route out so I could countersink this flange. It's going to screw on to the top, and then I'll screw it in to the step. Now I needed a router, and I've got a larger two-handed router, but it's all attached to my router table, so I didn't want to spend any more money, hey Hobbs, on a smaller router. So I used my drill, put a router bit in it, and then a depth stop attached to it. And it wasn't fun because it shook a lot, but it did what I needed it to do. So sometimes you just have to make do. Now once I get this attached and in place, the top tread will go on this, covering all of that. Then that will be screwed down like all the others. The holes will be countersunk, filled with plugs, and then sanded and filled in with filler, and then it'll all have a gloss natural finish. And then the other part is this is the last one that needs to be stained. All the others I've already stained the brown cherry, so they're ready to start stacking. And then I've got to get them all in position and mark it, and then take them all off, and then start with the first one, put it back on, and glue and screw everything, and work my way back up again. So that's what I'm working on today. I've got the spiral staircase pieces all stacked and placed. I have to stack them like this so that I can adjust each step where it's going to go, because they vary slightly. In order for the stairs to go up and fit in the smaller hole without cracking your head on the ceiling, they have to be spaced and angled in a certain way. So by doing it like this, I can get them where they need to go before they're glued and screwed in place. So I marked with some tape in 2 different places on each one, so that I can take them all off the pipe again, and then start with the bottom one and glue and screw and level, and then place the next one lining up with the tape marks until I get to the very top. And then the very top step will go on last, after these are all glued and leveled and straightened in place, because I have to cut part of the last step in order for it to fit. I have to cut a little bit of the outside corner off, and then it'll be screwed into this floor joist, and that'll help support the whole column also. And then eventually I'm going to take some railings, which will be probably cherry, little sapling, debarked and stained, and they'll be attached, one to each of the outside steps up to the ceiling, so that'll help support each step also. And then the railing I'm going to steam bend and attach to each one of those uprights, so it'll circle up around all the way to the top. Alright, now I'm going to take all this apart and start gluing and screwing them all in place. The first 2 steps are glued and screwed in place. Just lining up the marks and leveling everything. And once I get it in the place it needs to be, I drill the holes. There's 3 holes, 2 in the back for extra support towards the end, and then a 3rd in the front. And I have these little diagrams that I made so I know where all the existing knots and other screws are, so I don't drill into them. And then I just lay that over so it's lined up with the previous step. And then I drill the holes slowly, because it's hardwood, so I put some grease on the drill bit and drill, and then pull it out, clean it off, drill some more. And then I set the long screws, and the screws go all the way through and into the next step, so everything's tightly held. And if there's any gaps, I've got a bunch of little spacers that I'll put in, and then put a couple of beads of glue before I set the whole piece down. And then I just work my way up. The next one, I've got to unlock the top, slide that brace out of the way, and then bring down the next step, line it up with the marks, and do the same thing all the way up till I get to the top. that's it for now. I'm doing the final gluing and screwing all the steps in place where they're going to go. It's kind of cool. There's a skylight upstairs and the light shines right down the hole on the stairs at a certain time of the day. I had them all stacked, and then I marked with the tape so that when I line them back up, I have to unhitch this little board as a screw, and then it swings out of the way. Then I can lift each step on and then reattach it so it's in the exact place it has to be. And then I take these little drawings I did before, marking where all the screws of the previous step is, and then I line them up, mark where not to screw, and then I countersink and then drill. Sometimes I've drilled and then hit a screw someplace inside, so I have to reposition and do it again. But I'm going to get a shot from up above. Here's a top view. You can see the stairs. The reason I had to put them on and then position them is the steps have to be just in the right places so that they end in the right spot, and that you don't knock your head on the opening coming up. So the bottom steps where I want it to start are a little wider in between, and then they get slightly closer on the way up. All right, back to work. I wanted to show the very final step in this spiral staircase. It has got to be, the corner has to be cut at an angle, and then it's going to be bolted to the inside of this floor joist just for more stability and strength. And the way I'm doing this is I cut out a couple of cardboard templates. One is the size of the top step, and one is the cherry log base. And what I did is, if I can get this down here, I put it in place. Well, tried to put it in place here. Okay. And then I got it at the correct angle, and then drew a pencil line across. That's where it has to be cut. And I'll film some more as I finish it up. All right, back to work. I wanted to show the last cuts that I had to make on this last step. I measured it with this cardboard template, so I knew the exact angle, so I laid that out on top of the piece, cut the angle down to the depth I had figured out ahead of time. This little drawing had to be 1 5/8 and 1 3/4 wide. That's the depth where the step has to come down. This is going to be screwed and glued in place there, as well as the final long lag bolts that go all the way down through like all the others. And then I left a little lip here for the sheetrock that'll go on the ceiling, rather than just cut it off, it gives the underside of the staircase a more finished look. And then once those are glued and screwed in place, then I'll take the top step, cut that at the angle, then screw that down on the top, and then fill in the countersunk holes with some dowels like I did on all these others. And then I have to do the railing system, which will be done later. I've got to get back to plumbing and electrical before it gets too late in the season. And then I'll finish up with the insulation and a few details, and then it's moving in time. I'm really pleased with how they turned out. I've got the last step bolted in place. I put a couple of lag bolts through the joist into the step support, and then there's a couple in the bottom, and I'll put some wooden dowels in and smooth it out. And then let me see if I can up to the top here. I'll take a little stroll up the stairs. And this is the very top. And I countersunk so that this flange will screw down and then screw in place. And then when the top step goes on top, it's going to be carved out a little bit to make up for the height of the flange sticking up. And then I've got to cut the angle of it, and then the only thing left to do is stain, of course, and then build the railings. They're pretty sturdy, and they fit in the opening without cracking your head on the ceiling as you're walking up. So it worked out pretty well. I'm very pleased with it. And I just have to do some finish work. And then I've got to do the other cantilever stairs upstairs that are on the wall of the walk-in closet. And then I'm going to do some more electrical and plumbing. So I need to get to work. Okay, I wanted to show you what I did here. I built this triangle corner piece, and it runs parallel to the final step. And what I'm doing is I cut this piece out of a limb of cherry, and then I ground down the angles, and this is going to fit up here, and it will be lag bolted to the main column. That way there'll be 2 points where the column is attached, so it'll make it even more stable. And I'll show you what it looks like from up above here. Let me walk around.